When I was doing research for this video, I really got into this I'm a Strange Loop by Douglas Hofstadter, and that's his second book. First one is Gödel, Escher, Bach, which is pretty famous. These books, they pretty much are trying to investigate a similar phenomena. The idea that self and possibly consciousness emerges from self-reference inside the system, yet no system can certify its own existence from inside. And these evidences of what consciousness is manifest itself in different aspects of human creation. And I didn't really doubt this idea until recently. I came across this critique that refers to Wittgenstein, who is a famous philosopher of 20th century. Main point of Wittgenstein work is many of our philosophical and metaphysical questions are nonsense. They exist in our language, not in real world. And language is a tool that we use to accomplish day-to-day activities. So language is an incomplete system, like many others that we use. Math, musical theory, and any incomplete system has paradoxes inside. And usually we just switch to a different system when the system we're in cannot accomplish or help us accomplish the goal. So there's nothing necessarily metaphysical in these limitations of the system. So basically, we don't need empirical discoveries, according to Wittgenstein, to resolve any of these questions, or many of them. They don't need to be resolved once we define them properly. Something like that. And that made me think, what did it make me think? I was reviewing paper submissions for the AGI Artificial General Intelligence conference, and one of the papers caught my interest. It outlined a new theory of cognitive consciousness. It set a goal to formalize concrete way to measure cognitive consciousness in an agent, artificial or not, and use that measurement to inform ethical decision making, which I find problematic. To understand the basic idea of this theory, ask yourself, how many levels of nested reasoning can you sustain? Say, I think, he thinks, that I think, and so on and so forth. The paper defines this as lambda, the measure of how many levels of recursive reasoning a system can reliably maintain. It's generally reported that humans can maintain 2 to 3 levels of abstraction on average before sliding into guessing. And it's probably because of the limitation of our biological working memory. Another thing was interesting. The authors claim that ants most likely have 0 lambda because supposedly ant cannot possibly represent what another ant is thinking. Non-human animals like chimpanzees or dolphins likely cannot exceed 2. Don't know about that. This also reminded me of a strange loop. The idea that system can represent itself, then represent its representation. So the self becomes what self is reasoning about. The self is computing the self. Maybe you can say this strange loop becomes specific, concrete, and measurable in the theory of cognitive consciousness. Or maybe you cannot. Okay, so to be fair, in theory of cognitive consciousness, lambda is not the only variable. It is central to the theory, but the whole system is also relying on knows, beliefs, perception external, perception internal. I won't go into the details, but I'll leave a link if you want to do a deep dive. But I think the issue still stands. Theory of cognitive consciousness presents itself as an alternative to integrated information theory. Yet it evades to explain phenomenological consciousness. But why or how useful it is to even separate these two? I mean, cognitive consciousness and phenomenological consciousness. That's the hard problem of consciousness. This gap between personal experience and objective scientific empirical measurement is also why we still don't have a clean scientific definition of consciousness and the measurement system. If we're talking about P consciousness, it's concerned with what it is like to be a conscious being of a given type. Do you think there's something like being cat, fish, tree, lamp, microphone? Imagine there's a spider in your shower. Will you stop the whole shower to rescue a spider? Would you do that for a squirrel or a cat? Maybe it's a silly example, but if I get drunk and I lose my ability to model my own thoughts, does that make me less conscious? It makes me cognitively impaired. If I write a script that can go into 1,000 of these recursive reasoning loops, does that make that script more conscious, even more cognitively conscious? There's some mental ranks that we have for ethical decision making, but it's likely based on the capacity for suffering. And Lambda doesn't really capture any of that. Lambda measures cognitive capacity or agency, not sentience. It measures what agent can access, integrate, and use in reasoning and control, not what it is like to be an agent. And how can we rely on that for ethical decision making? And then even if we could, if you think about the big picture, we already have so many fragmented theories that are explaining all separate aspects of consciousness. We're still at the very primitive stage of our understanding of consciousness. We need a unified theory that will account for all aspects of consciousness. And on top of that, we must work to advance our neuroscience tooling. I like how the researcher from UC Irvine put it: empirical theories of consciousness must remain accountable for phenomenological findings. Any theory that disregards the structure of lived experience cannot provide a valid account of conscious phenomena. If none of that makes sense, don't worry. It doesn't.